Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar hosted by Trade and Investment Queensland under our partnership with the Australia-China Business Council Queensland Chapter, or ACBC. So we're delighted to have your company. We really value the contributions and support of our panelist and speaker today. And I'm just looking forward to having a good chat to you about something that's really important for Queensland exporters to get a grip of and understand in more detail: digital commerce or e-commerce. So today our seminar is going to equip you with updated intel on China's digital commerce or e-commerce market, the key platforms that are used, what's changed and what's trending during this COVID-19 period, and some tips on how businesses in Queensland can leverage this critical platform, this channel, for your own brand marketing and for sales to China. So Queensland, if you don't already know what live streaming is, or what a Taobao flagship store or a WeChat mini app is, this webinar today is for you. Through our key speaker, we're going to learn all about that and a lot more. We're also going to share some information about Trade Investment Queensland's first digital commerce program. It's a pilot for the China market, and it's being run by REDFERN. It's a 4-phase program, and it culminates in a sales period for Queensland participating exporters. So you'll hear more about that today too. We're also going to take some questions through the Zoom function, time permitting today. If we don't get through to your question, we'll aim to follow up after the webinar to share more information. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you, including the slides that will be shown today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, our presenter today, Mr. Ryan Malloy. He's the CEO of REDFERN Digital. REDFERN Digital is a China-specific full-service agency that helps companies navigate the digital ecosystem, increase their brand awareness, and convert that awareness into sales. They've been operating for about 15 years in China, and they've grown alongside their clients, some of which are now among the most successful brands in the China market. So REDFERN specializes in digital marketing strategy, consumer research, monitoring, does creative design, branding, social and paid media. And Ryan, who's joining us today, is the CEO of REDFERN. He's lived in China for over 17 years. And in that period, he's worked in the China marketing industry for over a decade. He's worked with some of the biggest brands coming into China, covering branding, strategy, social media marketing, e-commerce, as well as fledgling brands that are looking to leverage digital commerce to extend their reach. So good morning, Ryan. You're joining us from Shanghai in China today. So today we're going to kick off with a bit of a Q&A together. We're going to start with the basics. So Ryan, if I might kick off with your help in helping us understand what e-commerce is for China, who are the key platforms, and how are they impacting on consumer purchasing behavior and demand in China? Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Julianne, and thanks for having me today. So basically looking at China, the e-commerce ecosystem, it's quite different to the West, given that there's much more platforms, they have different functions, right? So instead of it being mostly Amazon, you've got multiple platforms. The one being Tmall, for example, being the biggest one under the Alibaba group from a B2C perspective. Then you have JD, which is a very similar kind of platform, also B2C, but also acts as a hypermarket. You have Taobao, which is essentially the eBay of China, which acts more as a C2C model, where people can easily set up stores. You see a lot of Daigou activity going through Taobao, for example. And then you have lots of other platforms, some of them are cross-border. So Tmall and JD both themselves have their cross-border platforms. And then you have Kaola, which has done very well. It's now #1 in most categories the last couple of years. So it's done excellent in terms of its growth. And then you have Little Red Book, which is more what we would call social commerce, or digital commerce. So social commerce has been growing a lot. We've seen it in WeChat as well as another example where you're linking influencers and display ads directly to e-commerce stores that aren't your traditional e-commerce platforms. Now, I guess the main difference with the way the ecosystem works here, because you have so many different platforms, it's really important brands choose one, or they choose a strategy that fits for them, right? Because with consumer search in the West, you go into Google and you type in the product you want, and the Amazon search function works. It's been embedded, so essentially you can see all the products through one search. But Chinese consumers will often search from different platforms, mostly from Tmall or JD. But it means that when working with influencers or doing media, it has to be very much connected with e-commerce.
Cool, Ryan. That was an awful lot in one answer. So I might just summarize. So we've got some platforms or that are B2C, so businesses selling to consumer. You've got other range that do more consumer to consumer sales.
Yeah.
And then you've got digital commerce, which is the WeChat and Little Red Book. And those are where we use influencers, or what people call KOLs, key opinion leaders, to help sell products directly C2C.
Directly within the ecosystem, So even, for example, within that platform. So you don't have to link the traffic to a bigger e-commerce platform. Basically what happened is a lot of the social media platforms in China realized that they were influencing purchase. So they wanted to capitalize on that. And as a result, they created their own shops within their social media platforms. So WeChat's done it. They have WeChat shops. They have different types of mini programs. Little Red Book set up their own store. And even Douyin, so the #1 media platform last year in terms of having a very low cost per engagement, in terms of the amount of traffic and conversion. Douyin's done very well. They even recently, actually, I think it was about 2 months ago, it was during the peak of the virus here in Shanghai, they set up a store within their ecosystem as well, called the Luban store. And it again really shows how, I guess, with Chinese e-commerce, it's moving very much to that kind of digital commerce end of the spectrum.
Cool, got it. So for those listening in Queensland who may not have heard Douyin, Ryan, maybe you can spell it out so we know how to spell it.
Douyin. So it's essentially TikTok, which everyone I'm sure has heard of. But yes, it's Douyin. So it's essentially a video platform. I think TikTok has done, we focus on Chinese social media. TikTok's done relatively well in the West and it's growing. But with China, it's become much more commercially focused. So when you're looking at a particular video, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner a shop that you can click through and purchase the product immediately. So it's become very useful for brands to one, increase awareness, but also for them as a sales function.
Okay, cool. So Ryan, you mentioned that most of your clients tend to do they just pick one and flog that hard, or do they sort of take up a couple, mix and match?
Yeah, it really depends on the size of the brand. So with a large brand, we would say try and get a strategy across as many platforms as possible that makes sense. So for example, maybe you'd run your own media on WeChat, but you'd be doing different types of paid ads on certain platforms, and they would then link to major stores. So the first question we would ask the brand is, are you looking at a cross-border play, or are you looking at domestic sales? If they're, for example, maybe in cosmetics or certain categories, cross-border is really a kind of a mandatory phase 1 for them. And then so we would look at, say, 2 platforms, Tmall Global and Kaola. And then what we would do is really, it's working backwards. So you look at, okay, these are the platforms that I want to sell on. And for smaller brands, they probably would only look at one in the beginning. So if they're looking at, for example, Tmall store, then we might look at Douyin because it links very well and we can use influencers on Douyin. We might look at doing more like live streaming inside of Tmall. So Tmall live streaming, which is very popular at the moment. Or we might say, for example, set up a WeChat store, and then we would work purely with WeChat KOLs. So the main thing I think is making sure that the money invested is really put to use and that it always connects to the store that is available. And the problem can be sometimes having 6 different stores across 5 platforms, the budgets can become quite quite large to maintain the amount of budget that needs to be spent. Most platforms ask for like a 5 to 10% of revenue that would be invested into that platform on Tmall or JD as like a minimum. So if you're looking to get quite good sales across all 3 or 4, then it's quite a bit of money to put in for some brands. So it depends. Usually I'd say for bigger brands, two or three major e-commerce platforms, and then touch points on as many that connect well. But having a functional purpose, not just posting out content on each one. And then for smaller brands, probably tackling one platform first, and then progressing to the next stages.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So you've touched on quite a few buzzwords there, which we're going to get to in a minute. So we've talked about cross-border, we've mentioned KOLs, we've talked about WeChat. But before we get into the granular of those important aspects of digital commerce, just stepping up for 1 minute. So COVID hit China in late January-ish.
Yeah.
I'd be really keen to hear your views on how COVID-19's impacted the digital commerce market in China, like what's happened and what's trending.
A lot. So basically, with Douyin, for example, it's a perfect example of how e-commerce had changed. When we were in lockdown, everything moved to e-commerce very quick. We saw some categories like fresh, for example, they went up by 3 times on JD. Anything in healthcare, sanitizers, they did very, very well. But even more kind of daily necessity products were doing well, but on e-commerce. So one thing that we've seen from the data now from that change is that a wider age demographic started buying online that weren't before. Especially 30, 40, 50-year-olds and plus now have started buying products on these platforms and actually have continued to do so as they've seen that, you know, it makes sense. It's very convenient. That was kind of the main change that we saw. It's kind of sped up what we saw being inevitable, which is that more and more consumption in China would go online. And COVID-19 really it brought that to kind of a much quicker pace than we anticipated, just because people were forced to shop online. So I know, for example, a lot of even like restaurants that were struggling and letting off staff, Hema, which is one of China's kind of O2O supermarket places, they continued to do well because they had an application where you could still buy from the supermarkets and have it delivered to your house. They were hiring all of these people. They were desperately hiring during the virus when it was at its peak. So it just had a huge kind of shift, I guess, in how the market was operating.
Gosh, well, some very positive news for clients that are already using digital commerce, and probably more the reason why we need to go through this for those who haven't. So Ryan, thanks for setting that big picture scene. So let's just jump back into the granular then. So you mentioned a bit before about C2C and how there's social commerce now, and WeChat being an example. Could you just share a little bit more info about how that works as a sales platform compared to the others you mentioned before, like the B2C, JD and Taobao?
Digital commerce, yeah. So it's very much when you set up your own store, and it depends on which platform you're on. But let's take WeChat for example. If you set up a WeChat store or a WeChat mini program, it's your own private traffic. So essentially, there won't be a large flow of traffic in the beginning. So what you have to do is look for influencers within that ecosystem that can drive traffic towards that store. And it's very much the same on Little Red Book, for example. So it's just much more cost effective keeping it with the ecosystem. The longer that what brands have found, or the platforms found, that the longer that a person takes to click through different platforms again and again to make a purchase, the more dropout, and essentially the lower the sales conversion. So the point with digital commerce is really that people can be within Little Red Book or within WeChat, see an article about a product that they like through an influencer that they follow, and can automatically click through to that shop or that particular product to purchase. So it's quite convenient. I guess with WeChat being a lifestyle application, it's being built very much for that. So you can kind of click through straight from the influencer to the shop and then purchase. And in many cases, it will already have your details of where you live because you'll have put it in before and WeChat will remember that. So yeah, it's very convenient.
Thanks, Ryan. And you talked how influencers and KOLs are kind of one of the ways, as well as live streaming, that WeChat and other digital commerce platforms penetrate to the consumers. So could you talk us a little bit more about, I know since COVID lockdown, live streaming's kind of exploded, and some of our own Queensland ecosystem have leveraged that. So just a week and a bit ago, a company called Bundaberg Brewed Drinks, probably well known to Queenslanders, they actually used, through their China importer and distributor, a very influential KOL in China to do some live streaming, and it sold out within seconds, literally, of this woman going live. So can you just tell us, for those who have no idea what KOL and live streaming is, what is it, Ryan? How's it work?
Yeah. So they can be they're kind of under one umbrella, right, of influencers, and then they can be separated into different types. So because of the live streaming element being so strong in China, and it's not in the West, some KOLs focus more on content. So they'll have like a WeChat account that they update every week, and it has information about new products and what they're doing in their life. You have influencers that are more focused on videos, so they'll be on Douyin, so it's more about showing their life again through video blogging. And then you have live streamers. So live streaming, it's a bit of a strange phenomenon. It's essentially, it's like window shopping, where you'll have a lot of Chinese consumers coming into a particular stream and probably have no, at that point, no intention of buying anything. And the reason behind it is really, I guess, a closeness towards that particular live streamer. So especially the more famous ones like Li Jiaqi, they, I guess, have created a bond with their followers, and they're quite funny in the way they sell products. And so people will come into the stream and they'll suddenly see products that they like and that are selling at a large discount. And it's kind of more instant buying, but live streaming is something that's really taken off. But I would say it's pretty much online window shopping. It's where people don't have an intention to buy something. We'll go through, but then see a product that's quite new, that's from Australia, Thunderbolt being a great example, and then we'll click through and purchase that product. One thing with working with live streamers is they can be really useful in terms of conversion, in terms of people, the first time trial of a product. But they do ask for a percentage commission that can be quite large, and usually you're best working with the higher tier KOL. So that's one thing to take into account. But in terms of the amount, within minutes they can sell out all of the stock nationwide, depending on the size of the KOL.
Wow, that's crazy. So it's kind of like the new TV shopping, like on Australia when you're watching telly, you got those TV shopping ads. It's sort of like that, but on your mobile phone or computer. Very much so.
Very much so. Yeah. TV shopping is exactly what it is. I mean, it's just much more, less kind of late night and more during the day here. And it's really kind of like a big focus, especially during the virus. A lot of people staying at home, they can't go shopping to the shops. So live streaming was really the solution.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's really helpful. Hey, and Ryan, one more buzzword that you kicked off with before, cross-border. I'm sure that there are some companies joining the webinar today who aren't quite clear what is cross-border, and is it different from digital commerce? Like, could you just spend a bit of time unpacking that?
So yeah, it's different in that digital commerce could be something that's domestic, right? So like if we look at digital commerce, WeChat has both cross-border and domestic. Little Red Book has cross-border and domestic, and then Douyin, for example, can only do domestic. Cross-border means that the products don't have to move through traditional trade. So it's less relevant, I think, the platform, but it's the function that it serves. So for example, Tmall in itself have Tmall Global and they have Tmall Domestic. So if your products are already in China, you have a distributor, then you would naturally work with Tmall. But if you're, for example, not in the market, maybe you're in a category that's difficult, can't go through animal testing, or is in cosmetics or certain types of food that's not allowed into the market, then it's a great option until that market access is given. And it's also sometimes a good stepping stone for brands to, I guess, not go through the whole process of setting up an entity or putting in place a distribution agreement and importing the products, where they can start to sell products through cross-border and see if it sells well. I mean, some of the most successful brands in the market, that's kind of been their market entry, especially out of Australia. If you look at like nutritional health, they originally couldn't set up, Blackmores and Swiss, for example, couldn't set up and register the products fast enough. So a lot of the newer products have to go through cross-border until they can then register them. And they've had great success, right? And then once you kind of have built that sales volume, that brand or product reputation, you can then move to the domestic model. So a lot of brands are using it.
Great. So Ryan, just to recap then, so cross-border is a great entry strategy for clients who have products and brands that they want to sort of test in the market, either because formal import isn't possible because there's still restrictions on China market access, or perhaps they haven't quite got themselves a proper partner and everything sort of lined up. So this is just an entryway. So if you're doing cross-border, so you mentioned some of the platforms, some of the social commerce platforms, they can use cross-border for selling.
Yeah.
Maybe just stepping back for a couple more fundamentals, Ryan. So does that mean that you need someone in China? Like if I'm a Queensland exporter and I'm wanting to explore cross-border commerce for my product, what's the process? Am I looking for a WeChat operator to do it for me and they do all the logistics? Or am I going to have to do the logistics? Maybe you could just explain a bit more about that.
There's a number of models. And so it really depends on what the brand's looking to do. Like, for example, with most of our clients, they would approach an agency, a TP, or Alibaba themselves, and they might want to sell through Tmall Global. The next step would be finding a logistics provider that can help with the fulfillment. A lot of the platforms have this ready. So Alibaba have Tinyao, which is like a logistics fulfillment, which will help in terms of delivering the products, storing the products in China. The next stage is really looking at forecasting sales, and then you ship up a number of products. There's two models. Either you can go through the bonded warehouse model, where you ship up a number of pallets and you store them in a warehouse, and then from there you would deliver out, and the fulfillment would be done by Alibaba, and the product never technically enters China. The other model for more premium lightweight products could be through postage. That's one thing we've seen a lot. So I know Australia Post do that with a number of brands. Essentially, the product is sent out from Australia, from the warehouse where it's stored, and it would then be posted up to China. So that only works with certain types of brands, right? So brands that are, I don't know, for example, in food and beverage that are heavier, like beverages, as an example, wouldn't really work on the postage system. So it'd be better sending up an amount of product, putting it in the bonded warehouse zone, and then from there it's sent out within China, the free trade zone. Yeah.
Okay,
and
great.
So that kind of, and then it depends. They can either look to add on other platforms at a later stage. So then later setting up a WeChat store, and then also again looking at either another logistics provider or trying to get one that can support all of the different platforms. That would be a later stage. And then really it's forecasting and setting up the product to be in the bonded zone here.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So before we go into a case studies to sort of help our Queensland participants unpack all of that, one last cheeky question. So KOLs and live streaming are pretty popular now, and you mentioned that they work off a commission. Could you give us like any rough ideas of what kind of commission range, like as a percentage these KOLs ask for?
It's a tough one. So really, it depends on the product as well. So if we look at live streamers first, they really demand the terms. And so if they think the product's going to sell well, and they don't take all products. Like, so for example, Li Jiaqi, the #1 KOL, will see a product. It's even sometimes irrelevant of how big that brand is. If it's not a product that he thinks will sell well, then it was unlikely to take it, because a lot of it's based on commission. Commissions can run up to 60% with the big live streamers. It's really, really high. I've heard of it going up. There was a couple of weeks ago, it was a yogurt brand. I think it was Pascal Yogurts, and they were around 60, 70%. So it really does depend how much the live streamer feels that the product will sell. Then if you look at the other platforms, it's much less. So like smaller live streamers, for example, through Tmall, they could be anything from 10 to 15%. So much less, much more reasonable. And then if you move out into WeChat, the majority are paid a set fee. And the best is usually around 10,000 RMB, 10 to 20,000 RMB size KOLs on WeChat, we find to have the best return. And we'll often try and package a kind of a commission basis with them just to try and give them some incentive. But that, again, that's really up to them. With the more content focused KOLs, it's usually kind of a set amount that they would have. And then other platforms can be less, but the conversion is much lower. So like a Weibo and Little Red Book, a KOL might be only a few thousand RMB, but we find that the conversion to sales is not as good. So we usually suggest for clients to really focus on Douyin or WeChat. And that means as a result of that, you either have to have a store on one of the major platforms or within WeChat itself and the WeChat mini program shop.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So 10K to 20K renminbi is about 2 to 4K Aussie, roughly. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that gives us a good idea. Okay, cool. So Ryan, let's segue on to a case study to kind of put that all together. So I might hand over to you to control the screen and walk us through a case study.
Okay. Okay, is that working?
Yep, all good.
Excellent. So Athletic Greens is a brand that we've seen doing quite well here. We've noticed a lot of people on WeChat talking about the brand. If you look at other platforms, they're almost non-existent. But you know, I've had a word with the brand itself, and I know they're doing quite well. Their sales are increasing, and they have used purely WeChat as their platform. So they put all of their investment into WeChat. They work with WeChat KOLs. They have a brand ambassadors that post on their moments about their product. So the product is essentially a nutritional supplement. It's a powder that you take ongoing. So you take it every month. So a mini program is perfect for that because it's allowed them to put in some personalization. So for example, you can sign up for deliveries on a monthly basis that automatically come through. You can have, for example, freebies that are sent through with certain packs, and it very much also creates a community where they can have WeChat groups where people talk about the product, and very much they link it to lifestyle. So you can see when you look at their media, their social media, their e-commerce and their paid media, although there's some seeding being done on Little Red Book, seeding essentially means giving out free products to users who will then share on their moments. So Little Red Book as a platform is 90% female. They've been focusing very much on females. So it can be useful for brands to do some seeding, and it's very low cost, right? You just have to essentially give out products for them to then post. That's another strategy that brands use. So apart from that, in terms of trying to get a better ROI out of their budget, they've really just focused on WeChat and WeChat only. And they're using lots of WeChat KOL. So if you search about the brand within the WeChat ecosystem, there's many discussion topics going on about how great the product is, how healthy it is. And that's really what I think is most important. The reason they've done this is, one, WeChat KOLs have a higher conversion. And two, setting up a WeChat store is not a huge cost. Essentially, you know, it can be as low as a couple of $1,000s, or if not even less than that, depending on how much you want to really, I guess, change and integrate the functions, membership, loyalty schemes, things like that. Then it can become much more. But generally, it's quite a straightforward setup, and it's your own shop. So you can run, it's your own traffic, it's your own community that you build. And then you can basically look at different KOLs you're using and determine your own ROI. And once you find KOLs they've basically found some KOLs they've worked with that have done very well, that they've continued then to use. And as a result, they've become kind of ambassadors for the brand. So a couple of them we've worked with ourselves, and I've seen them posting on their own moments. very freely about how passionate they are about the brand. So this is their mini program they've set up. It's very straightforward. It has like a home, product page, about page, and you can just swipe through to look at different products that they have. And then you can place orders very simply. You can see if from the three different screenshots here, from home page through to product page, click through, and then you buy now. It's very simple. And they've done things such as discounting. The one thing about the China market, everyone says it's premium and you should increase the price of your products by so much. And I agree with that, I do, but it's also a big discount market. And the way that works is a lot of Chinese consumers, the feeling of saving money comes through having large discounts on premium products. So people will buy premium products, but there usually has to be an incentive for that first time purchase. And these guys figure that out pretty well. So they basically, the way it runs is if you get the ongoing purchase for a monthly delivery, then the first item, the welcome pack, they call it, you can see on the left, is discounted. So they've very much taken that into account, that it's really trying to, get people to try the product. And if the product is liked and it's well received, then you'll have a higher repeat purchase rate. So, and this is some of their paid media activities. So just very straightforward discussions around the product, how it can be used, what it can be mixed with, and all of this links back to their account. So it grows their follower base, it grows their sales channel, it grows their mini app followers, because also with a mini program as well, people follow that particular mini program, they're then followers ongoing. So that's another element, that they now have kind of 2 channels within WeChat that they can reach out to. So they've just done it very well. I think under what would be, they're actually quite a large company, but using kind of more of an SME sized budget, they've focused purely on one channel being WeChat, and they've focused on the element of conversion, growing the brand, growing the sales, and then later, now I know they're looking at different e-commerce channels to focus on. So it's very much goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, where you have to make sure that all of your media is linked to e-commerce. So that you're getting a good ROI. And then once you fulfill that channel and done a good job, you can then later move to other e-commerce platforms. So yeah, and these are just some of the posts that they've put together. Yeah, it's been a very successful brand entry.
Thanks, Ryan. That's really helpful to sort of spend some time walking through a case study, just for us to better understand, how we leverage WeChat and what's involved. That's really helpful. So I'm hoping now that our Queensland audience has a little bit more of a clear understanding of the e-commerce or digital commerce options that are popular in China. So whether it's B2C or C2C, we also understand a bit more about the sales marketing tactics like KOLs and live streaming, which is kind of the new TV shopping. And we have a bit of an understanding now of the difference between cross-border as against e-commerce. So I guess before we move on to talking a bit about the TIQ REDFERN Digital Commerce Program, I just wanted to flag a couple more important points. So Ryan, regardless of what platform you use, I'm assuming that 2 important things have to be looked after by Queensland companies. And one is language, because I'm assuming this isn't done in English. And then the second point is you talked about fulfillment and logistics. So obviously a Queensland company either has to be able to do that themselves or have in-market partner. So any quick comments about the language and fulfillment points?
For the program?
Well, not for the program, just in general, just about if
in
I
general,
have a Queensland company and I want to look into this, those 2 things are important.
Yeah, so in general, I would work with the platforms. So everything kind of runs with the platforms. If you're to set up your own WeChat mini program, it's a little bit more difficult. You'd have to approach Tencent, who would know some providers, or you need to basically find a logistics provider that would help with the warehousing. And then there's a number of 3PLs. And essentially it's just looking at cost. What is going to be the warehouse fee? It has to be within the free trade zone as well. So the product has to be stored there, but which ones are going to help with bringing the product into free trade zone, and then with the fulfillment. Yeah, I think it's just really looking at a number of options and then pricing them up. And then with language, I mean, there's lots of agencies that can help in terms of pushing out content. The problem with WeChat is that it has such a huge amount of content. So it's different to Instagram, where you kind of have an image and you have a caption and a little bit about the product. It's storytelling. So that's one thing. Again, I mean, with agencies, really now the price as well for support on running WeChat accounts has come down dramatically, to $1,000 to $2,000 a month in some cases, to run a number of platforms. So it's not too much of a cost. It's really just looking at getting that amount right, getting a good logistics provider from a cost perspective, that has cross-border experience, because they will have to have a warehouse within the free trade zone. And then that's really the main focus. With the KOLs as well, what a lot of brands can do is work with agencies that have a paid media element built in. So that's something that we have, where the agency will take a commission, but they ensure that all of the campaigns are run for you. Because that can be hard as well. Like, where do I find these KOLs? So basically, an agency would take anywhere from 10 to 15%, and you would agree, okay, I'm going to spend $20,000 over this period, and make sure that all of the stops are put in place with the agency to ensure that you're happy with the KOL choice, that they go through, they translate the content so it's in line with what your brand image is. And that's really the best way. So there would need to be some agency support for brands, but it doesn't have to be this huge, multi-platform cost. It can be very much, okay, I need support on 4 pushes a month on WeChat, and I need support from a paid media element where you would have to pay a 10% commission to that agency. So I think it's becoming more and more accessible.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess if Queensland companies are already exporting and their in-market agents, distributors, or partners have a WeChat program already, then your key point there is storytelling super important. You have to have a constant flow of information to entice, attract, keep those customers, and grow your WeChat group that your importer or distributor is managing. And then that importer distributor may quite often need extra help with an agency helping them plug away or tap into KOL. So that's really helpful. That kind of gets us a bit of a clearer picture on that. So maybe let's shift gears to our last topic for today, which is just a bit of time, Ryan, with your kind help, understanding what TIQ's first ever digital commerce program is. China is the first pilot, and we are engaging REDFERN to run it for us. So would you mind taking over again the controls, Ryan, and just help us know, what is it, what will it deliver, and what do Queensland companies have to invest and commit to? Because it is a 4-phase program which ends up in sales, but maybe you can help us unpack that now.
Yep, sure. I'll just show my screen again. There we go. Is it showing?
Yep, all good.
Yep. Okay. So I guess really one of the inspiration behind the accelerator program was what we're seeing up here in the market. There's a number of things. Firstly, more and more brands, I think, are nervous about China. Initially, it's always been seen as a big opportunity. It is a huge opportunity, and what it can deliver for brands if they're successful is beyond all measure. But it's difficult because there's so many different platforms, and I think that's quite unnerving. So we wanted to create something that was more, I guess, simple, that allowed for brands to have a try and to also to focus on one platform. The other thing that we're seeing is that more brands are struggling to find distributors. So we're seeing a lot of issues where distributors have already decided what categories they're looking for. And as a result, they're rejecting more brands and they're focusing on kind of key categories that they think will sell well now and in the future. And then the final part was, it's really that just some brands don't fit, right? So we've worked with brands that have come up in the past and we've said, well, these types of products, we've done the focus groups, these type of products, they don't fit the consumer palette. So it needs to be changed. And some brands listen and they change that up and they'll come up with different SKUs as their hero, and others will just say, okay, it's not really my market, I'll focus on another market. So I think the main point of what this was trying to show is, like, one, it definitely, it provides a sales opportunity for brands at the end, but it also will allow brands along the journey to understand whether they're fit for the market and what they need to change in order to sell in the future, because it's a huge cost exercise for a brand to come up and figure out that the product doesn't fit, the brand doesn't fit, and then have to go back and then kind of go through that whole product innovation again. So that was really the main point. And so what it provides really is a number of things. It helps enhance brand positioning, brand image, awareness, and overall profile. I'll just jump through slides because I'm terrible at doing things in order. So this is essentially the program phases that we have. So through each phase, it will allow brands to be assessed, to understand more about what they need to do for their category, their brand, and then all the way down to the item. And on each phase, some participants will have to say, okay, the product, it doesn't fit for either cross-border, or it doesn't fit for China at the moment. These are the changes that you need to make. And these are the categories that are kind of been the main focus. So phase one has really been more about the broader spectrum of, we'll help brands understand through reports what's happening in their category. So we'll pull actual sales data from all of the platforms to look at what categories are doing well, what types of SKUs are doing well. We'll pull industry interview data as well. So we'll go out to top CEOs, top distributors here in market to understand what kind of brands they're looking for. And then we'll do channel analysis as well. So through different platforms, trying to understand which ones sell best. And from that, we'll get a good idea of, okay, does the brand fit into the categories for the program? And within them categories, is there a good brand fit, essentially? Phase two is more looking at the brand itself. So actually, phase two is more the brand fit. We go through a number of different methodologies here. Well, we're going through and auditing the brand itself, looking at competitors, seeing which ones have sold well, which ones haven't, why, success rates. We have a proprietary tool called InRes, where essentially, and as I mentioned before, a lot of what is driving sales in this market is KOLs. So REDFERN Digital actually, we put together a tool that allows brands to send product out to influencers who will then give feedback on whether they think this product will have success in the market. So that's something that all of the brands in phase two will have access to. And then also we'll do focus groups on taste, on packaging, and on all of the kind of more physical elements around the brand of whether we think that would sell and whether it works. And then as we go through each stage, the next one is more about the strategy, right? So looking at what are the key USPs that the brand has, what should be focused on. So a lot of brands that we found as well, when they come into market, they'll focus on it's from Australia and it's nutritious. But the issue is that competitors are saying much more sharpened selling points about their brands. And so that brand really struggles to stand out in the market. So we'll bring through some knowledge and know-how on how to really sharpen the USPs. And then the final part is through a mini program, essentially selling, allowing the brands over a period of time to sell the products into market through KOL spend. So that's really the program phases. And then what this allows the brands to get from the program, depending on to what stage they get, is brand positioning, awareness, and overall profile being raised in China. Data and insights. So we're the only agency in China, together with our partners Early Data, that are able to get cross-platform data. So we can look at Tmall, JD, Kaola, all of the different platforms, and we can see exactly how that category is doing. Is it saturated? Is there an opportunity? Is it not growing? And that really then gives brands a good idea of, okay, this just isn't the market for me. So I think that's the really important part about this exercise. Some will get to sell, and it'll be really good in terms of getting that product feedback and that data to understand how them sales went. And then for others, though, it's going to be really about understanding about, is it the right market? And should I be making the steps into entering into China? And then directing traffic for sales. And then identifying what will make the brand stand out in the market. So that's another key part for some of the brands. Once they get towards the sales part, it's about, if you look at e-commerce in China, it's very, each page has so much detail. And a lot of the journey is really on the landing page. So a Chinese shopper goes through and they see the e-commerce landing page and they scroll down. That's where you tell your brand story. And so it has to have a lot of sharpened USPs, and a lot of brands don't. They take what they have in the West, what works, and then they'll put that through onto the landing page, and it's not always correct. So just some general knowledge on how each individual brand can change what they're doing in terms of USPs. And then also we'll create some, develop some creative visuals as well. So some brands that get through to stage 3, we'll be working with our creative team to actually come up with the USPs and to design banner ads and different imagery that they can either use as part of this project, or they can take away as their own IP and use at a later date. And really, what we want to put forward in this is, I mean, we're just another agency in China, right? So we want to show that we're using a lot of methodologies. You can see here, there's so much put into what we're, the insights that we're driving to determine which brands will do well, which brands wouldn't do well, to try and help brands understand what they need to change. We're doing everything from social listening. So we're looking at the consumer. We're pulling actual sales figures from all the platforms for the last year. We're looking at key industry interviews, which is my personal favorite, calling up key distributors and asking them what brands sell well, why do they sell well, and what brands would you be looking for from Queensland. So that's another one as well that I think really adds a lot of value. Less quantitative, but definitely a lot of insight. Channel analysis, a full brand audit, in-res, as I mentioned, our influencer tools. We'll be sending out products to different KOLs. And then, and that's not for the paid media element. The paid media element is another part that KOLs will also be pushing out, but this is purely for research, this element here. Focus groups, so we'll do them by categories, and all brands that get to that stage will have the opportunity to have their product shown, tried, and tasted, and then competitor analysis, and then shopfront development and KOL promotion. So there's a lot of different methodology that goes into the project. And as I mentioned, like the first phase that we're going through in the beginning is going to be creating these reports that will be delivered to the brands. I think it's important they go first because these will be very much a holistic view on the market. And that's why I think it's really important that the brands take part, because even if they don't, for example, make it to the later stages, and there's things that they found out that they have to change about their product for the China market, it's still going to be some great insights that come out of these reports in the beginning, which would really allow brands to understand, okay, maybe they're looking at doing new product development in the future and can take some of this into consideration if looking to make a more China-specific product. And that really covers most of the methodology as well. So that's phase 1, and that will be really looking at, okay, these are the categories, these are the products that sell well, this is what consumers are looking for, and making that fit. Phase 2 then is looking more on the consumer element only. So it's saying, okay, there's a demand for the product in phase 1. We know that this product sells well in the market, but why do certain brands do better than other ones? So we'll be looking at competitors, we'll be going out to the KOLs and the focus groups, and we'll be putting, different milk powders up against each other to try and drive insights that help brands understand, for example, what helps other brands sell better. One thing we've noticed, and I think a lot of small to medium-sized brands get concerned that bigger brands do well in the market. From our experience, that's not really the case. It's very much you're starting fresh when you come to China. And so small brands can often have just as much opportunity as big brands. And that's one thing we've seen. Like if we look at Mother and Baby, for example, I'm not sure if you've heard of Little Freddy, but it's actually a Mother and Baby product that has taken China by storm. It's billions of RMB they sold last year. And they essentially set up 6 years ago, it was a family business. And what they did was they focused on channels, they ticked all the right boxes, they ensured that their products were suited, and they constantly got consumer feedback to understand what would be the next product they created to develop their range further and further. So that's another point as well. It's really, for Chinese consumers, a lot of these brands are new, they're all new. They don't have the nostalgia necessarily connected to them that we would have in the West. So it's an opportunity for us to understand what is driving that purchase. And then, so that would really lead into phase 3, but phase 3 is kind of taking that all together and then now looking at creating, okay, we understand what's important for brands in this category. How do we create visuals? So looking at key slogans, the branding. And the funny thing is it never has to be a huge exercise of localization. We don't want to take a brand and change everything about it and, make it barely recognizable to what it is in back home. what we're looking at is, okay, maybe there are just 2 or 3 things of benefits that this product has that are not being mentioned enough and are not being put at the forefront. And from that, we can then develop these visuals that can be sent out to the brands. We can give them a strategy on what should be their key comms. And if the brands, and even though at this point they would then be going through to do the sales aspect of this program, they can still take this away later, right? So the question would be, okay, they go through the sales program and it went well, but not quite as great. They can still take these elements and look to how it can change them to then relook at how they would come back and do it differently. And for brands that sell really, really well, we're hoping that, you know, this would be what kind of, these are the elements that would help them stand out. And that really goes through to the final part. So the final part, it will be a cross-border play. And it's going to be essentially a mini program sales channel, or kind of like a supermarket, you could say, right? Of Queensland brands that will then be pushed out by different influencers under an overriding theme that we're going to develop as the project goes along. And that will really provide all brands with kind of an equal chance within this store to be recognized and to have sales through the partner that we're working with. So essentially the product will have to be stored in Australia. It's a cross-border play, and we will work with our partner AU Express, who are, I think, the largest now for, they do a lot of cross-border sales and pick and pack from Australia into China. In terms of the Daigou market, they do probably the vast majority of all package parcel sales into the China market. So we'll work with them in terms of the products will be put into their warehouse, stored there, and then through each campaign, they will then be sold through into China. So this really shows, I guess, how the payment flow will work. And then the payment will then go back to them and then be later distributed to the brands once it's settled, because the payment will actually be settled in Australia. It's a cross-border payment. So Chinese consumers, the money will go directly through the WeChat account and be settled in Australia for brands. So that's how the kind of the order payment, the payment flow works. And then this is how, in terms of the parties' responsibilities, in terms of the marketing, promotion, shop front, Sydney warehouse, it really shows how orders run as well. So it looks complicated, but it's actually quite straightforward. And in terms of product flow as well, so this just really shows on a more holistic level how the products will move, right? So pretty much, apart from the payment flow that will come through WeChat accounts in China back to Australia, a lot of the product will be stored and sold basically from Australia. And then it will go through AU Express, through their warehouse in South China, and then be distributed from there. Yeah, so some of the conditions, the focus will be around a number of target categories. And I mean, when we say a category, really we're talking about super categories, right? So food and beverages got lots of different categories within it. Really we're looking at how many brands we can provide data for across some categories, but there would be some limitations. Really, we've got to look at things like parcel postage laws, frozen, for example, it's very difficult to sell cross-border. And then also looking at products that are not allowed to be sold into China. And then really, I guess what we would call is the cross-border viability, right? So some products, it's a parcel system. It's not the bonded zone system. So some products that are just, I guess, low value and not very expensive, it will be harder to sell through this channel. But yeah, I think that shouldn't put off any brands, and I encourage all brands to have a go. I think it'll be a great opportunity. And the final thing that we've really mentioned is around trademarks as well. This is very much at a brand's own risk. If they want to sell to China through the cross-border models without a trademark, they can, but we don't suggest it, just because it might lead to other problems down the line around counterfeit, copycat brands, things like that. So it's not something we would suggest. Setting up a trademark and getting it registered in China, obviously they have their own filing system. It's separate to the rest of the world. You can't do it globally. So and it's come down very much in terms of price to set up a trademark nowadays. So even for brands that actually aren't taking part in the program, I would recommend probably having your trademark registered in the China market either way, just to be on the safe side. Yeah, and then in terms of the brands that work in the program, there's been a lot of time and effort put in on our side, on TIQ side. So it really is going to be something quite special in terms of the different phases that we run through. So the other thing would be just making sure that the brand's committed to the program. We would need, for example, some products to be sent through up to China so that we can go through the tasting periods with the focus groups, working through INRES, for example. And then also at the end of the product, there would, if they get to the sales period, there would be logistics costs that would be involved as well. But that's something that we can very much put in place with AU Express at the time. Yeah, and then in terms of completion of phase 1, we need to look at going through a different process to make sure that the brand identity is the same. So that really means that our creative and content team having a good discussion with the brand to understand what the brand represents, what changes can be made, and to ensure that we're all on the same page. And that would be, you know, us having enough provision of marketing and creative collateral as well. And then essentially all of what we make will be then provided back to the brands afterwards as well, so they can use at a later date. Yeah, and then there would be ongoing communication. So in the beginning, it would be very much sending out different reports where I'm happy to go through all of the detail with the different categories and trying to understand the opportunity that's there for them brands. And then later it would be more one-on-one discussions as we get closer to the sales period. Yeah, so these are some of kind of just the different phases, the self-check. It will help brands understand, okay, why didn't I make it to the next stage? What was the issue? And it really, it's kind of like a funnel in probably that's a good way to describe it. It starts out very much of, are you in the right category? Is there a market for the brand? CBEC capability, some products just aren't made to be sold cross-border. And then as we go through to phase 2, it's more about the brand fit. Is it price competitive? And sales history and trends that they've had in the past. Phase 3 is really going into understanding more about, does the product fit and will it sell? And getting that right. And stage 3, we're really then working with brands to get ready for the sales period of phase 4. And the things that are expected, we would need, for example, not really up in the beginning, but at a later date, samples that we would then have to send out, brand communication, collaboration throughout, and then also we need to put in place some agreements. So the brands that go through to the final stage will have a fair bit of media display. So we'll be working with KOLs, a number of KOLs over a period of time. So that's something as well. The brand has to be in agreement that they're happy to be represented by these different influencers. And that's a stage where we'll go through and work very closely with the brands to ensure that the influencers that we've chosen around the categories are a good fit.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's mostly it. And then there's some things on roles and responsibilities. So in terms of the brands AU Express and then how that works as well. So obviously we're partnering with TIQ to run this project. But in terms of the KOLs and the content, that will be the responsibility of REDFERN Digital. So that's why it's very important that we work with the brands closest towards the end, just to make sure that you guys, there's alignment with them KOLs. So
great. So Ryan, just a couple questions just to wrap up then. So to summarize, this pilot program, which is the first time TIQ's endeavored to do a digital commerce project for Queensland products in the 3 categories for China with a professional partner such as REDFERN. So it's a masterclass in the sense that you get individualized coaching in a way and feedback and intel, including data and focus group feedback from REDFERN on your product, your brand, and the attractiveness to China market. But it's a masterclass with benefits because companies that come through to the end phase are actually in a cross-border sales promotion, Queensland branded sales promotion. So there isn't any participation fee. What we need the Queensland participants to commit to is to working with Redfern to be responsive and to look after the cost of sending the samples through our express up to China. And then there'll be a commission cut. So Ryan, a cheeky question. You work with so many clients. If you were going to work with a company to provide all this tailored background work before a sales program, what kind of money value are we talking that a company would get by, if they had to contract someone like Redfern, roughly how much would this be worth?
A fair bit, because the program, it benefits on cost because of economies of scale, and I think that's why it's such a great program. That working with different brands at the same time, it actually, if we would run through this process with a brand individually, you've got to think we're sending out samples to 15 KOLs, we're organizing, 8 focus groups. We have to buy and purchase the data, the e-commerce data that goes across all the different platforms. I mean, the data alone is 10 to 20,000 Australian dollars, right, in terms of value. So it's really something that I think it's a great opportunity, because it would be, as a brand alone, to come and go through this program quite expensive. I mean, and especially with the media spend elements, it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So it's something that all brands that take part will be able to I guess get the benefits from. But I mean, with all the media spend that's been put in, it could be up to a couple of $100,000. It's quite a big program.
Yeah.
And especially with phase 2 and phase 3, there's really going to be a lot of individual one-on-one support, where we'll be going through the brand and going through the brand's assets and trying to help them understand, okay, if I'm coming to China, this is what I have to do, and based off all of the methodology that we put at the beginning. So I think that's really, for me, the sales part is always, it's always nice, right? It's a nice part that people get to see their product going to China and people are buying it and consuming it. And that's great. But really, in phase 3, I think these are assets that the brands can take away and can use for, the next 3-4 years when looking at China.
Yeah. So you're getting
your
data,
really
you're getting your focus group info, your data on category spend and trending China, you're getting your focus group info back on your product, your branding, your attractiveness. And you're getting some design insights and suggestions from Redfern, which, as you said, you get to keep. And then for companies who go through the sales, they get a chance to sell product, pay a commission, but obviously have the sales revenue. So, and Ryan, you touched on, some people might be concerned about IP, but part of this project is also helping them understand IP protection strategies. And TIQ, we have a webinar on the 12th of May that will be run with the Australian Government IP Counsellor for China. So that'll also help in the lead up to the program for some insights on IP. And then for companies who want to know about it, Ryan, we have the registration link on the TIQ website. So just go to TIQ website, you'll see the China Digital Commerce Program there. You'll be, if you have questions, follow up with TIQ team through the website, or if you already have a relationship manager, reach out, because we are looking this month in May for companies to raise their hand, express interest, register, so that this program can kick off and your team can start evaluating and confirming which companies make it. So just a shout out to Queensland participants. Today's session hopefully has helped you understand the program a little bit better than just getting a cold email from TIQ. And we're really looking forward to helping Queensland companies. This is an investment by the Queensland government to help fast track Queensland brands, Queensland products doing well on digital channels in China. And as Ryan said, more importantly, it's the coaching, the mentoring, and the masterclass element where you're actually getting an awful lot of data, intel, insights, and advice as part of this program. So it's not just taking you directly to sales, you're actually going to be prepped and made more China ready, more China attractive by going through the phase program. So I'm conscious of time, and I just wanted to thank you so much, Ryan. I've learned an awful lot. I think I now understand a bit more about B2C, C2C, the crazy buzzwords of cross-border, live streaming, KOLs. And I think I also have a better grip on what the TIQ and REDFERN digital commerce program offers companies. So this time round, it is for physical products in the 3 categories, and it will be run as a pilot. So Ryan, thank you so much. And your presentations will be made available to participants after the webinar. And we look forward to working with you on the journey ahead.
Zaid, very exciting. Very exciting.
Thanks, Ryan.
Excellent.
So audience, thank you. So for our Queensland audiences, I already mentioned 12th of May, we have an IP webinar that will help you understand IP ins and outs, and has a focus on e-commerce case studies, with the former Managing Director for Asia for Blackmores joining us to run that case study. And before that, later this week, we have another webinar on China with 2 presenters, China Skinny and China Policy. So thanks again, everyone. Stay well. And we look forward to your participation in some more digital commerce to profile Queensland in China. So thanks, everyone.